Welcome back to yet another section of Ways with Words. In our last class, we went through the writer William Somerset Maugham. Today, we are going to start a very simple short story, Appointment in Samara. I know all of you are very interested to hear stories, especially the short stories. Today, I also want to say a story for you. Are you ready to listen me? Here, death speaks. Death tells a story. There was a merchant in Baghdad. He sent his servant to the market to buy the provisions. The servant was very obedient. He went to the market to buy the provisions. The market was very busy. When he walks through the market, someone already jostled him. At the moment, he felt it is a woman. He became very curious to know about who pulled him. He just turned back to know who pulled him. But he didn't see anyone. When he walks, he met death in front of him. He ran very fastly to his master's house. Somehow he reached in front of his master without buying the provisions. He revealed all the things to his master and he requested his master to give his horse. He wanted to go to Samara to escape from death. The master was very generous. He gave his horse to his servant. When the servant got the horse, he went to Samara. I think all of you remembered well. Samara is approximately 70 miles north of Baghdad. The servant started his journey to Samara by using his master's horse. In the evening, the master decided to go to market. When he reached at the market, the merchant also met the death. He asked him, "Why you threatened my servant?" Then the death told him, "Actually, I am not threatened your servant. I became surprised when I saw your servant in Baghdad because I had appointed a meeting with him tonight in Samara." Did you understand? Death told the master that death had fixed a meeting with the merchant servant tonight in Samara. I think you have the common sense to understand death's appointment is death. The servant will die today at night in Samara, not in Baghdad. That's why when the death met his servant in Baghdad in the morning, he became surprised. But what happened? Because of the fear to escape from death, the servant flee to Samara. From this, we can understand death is an inevitable part of our life. We can't escape from death. The time of death and place, it's already fixed. That we are calling it as fate. So no one can escape from death. It has a right time and right place. That time and that place we will meet our death. That's why William Somerset Maugham gave the title Appointment in Samara. All of you please take the page number 61 in your textbook. Death speaks. Here death speaks. There was a merchant in Baghdad who sent his servant to market to buy provisions and In a little while, the servant came back, white and trembling. Provisions means it's already given here in your textbook. Supplies of food, drink or equipment, especially for a journey, that it is provisions. Here the merchant in Baghdad who sent his servant to the market in Baghdad to buy provisions. But after a little while, the servant came back. The servant became white and trembling and said, he started to shiver. He became feared. That's why his color turned to white because of fear. He said, his master, just now when I was in the marketplace, I was jostled by a woman in the crowd. Jostled means push or bump against roughly, often in a crowd. When we are walking through a market, unknowingly or knowingly, we are pushed by someone, that it is jostled. So the servant revealed to his master that when I was in the marketplace, I was pushed by a woman in the crowd. And when turned, I saw it was death that jostled me. So he was very curious to identify the woman who jostled him. That's why he turned back. He identified it was not a woman, it was death. She looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Now lend me your horse and I will ride away from this city and avoid my fate. So he revealed to his master that she make me frightened by her gestures. Actually that person is death. That woman is death. She makes him threatened by her gestures. I want to escape from my fate. I don't want to die now. I want to escape from the fate. So you please lend me your horse. I want to escape from death. I will go to Samara and there death will not find me. So he took the decision. He wanted to escape from death. He felt Samara is the safe place. He can escape to Samara, then death will not catch him. That's why he decided to escape from death to Samara. I think all of you remembered well. Samara, it lies approximately 70 miles north of Baghdad. That's why he requested his master to give his horse to go to Samara. The merchant lent him his horse. The merchant was ready to give his horse to his servant, and the servant mounted it. The servant sat on the horse and he dug his spurs in its flanks, and as fast as the horse could gallop, he went. Spur, it's already given here. Spur means a device with a small spike that is worn on a rider's heel and used for urging a horse forward. So we can see that a small spike that is worn on rider's heel to control the horse. The next word is flank. Flank is also given here. The side of a horse body between the ribs and the hip, that it is flank. So he was ready to ride the horse. by using the spur and flank. Then the horse gallops. Gallop means the fastest pace of a horse, the fastest speed of a horse, with all the feet off the ground in each stride. So when the servant mounted on the horse, it started to move very fastly. Then the merchant went down to the marketplace, and he saw me standing in the crowd, and he came to me and said, "Why did you make a threatening gesture to my servant when you saw him this morning?" So we can see that in the evening the merchant himself went to the market. At the moment the merchant met the death, he was very bold enough to ask or to question the death. So the merchant asked the death, "Why did you threaten my servant in this morning?" "That was not a threatening gesture," I said. "It was only a start of surprise." At the moment, the death revealed that I didn't make a threatening gesture. Actually, I was surprised by seeing him in Baghdad. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad. Astonished means surprised. I was surprised to see him in Baghdad, for I had an appointment with him tonight in Samara. Why the death became surprised when she sees the servant in Baghdad? She revealed that death had an appointment with the servant that night with him in Samara. So she became surprised why the servant he is standing in Baghdad. He wanted to escape from fate. He wanted to escape from death. That's why by lending the horse from his master, he went to Samara. That's why we are telling we can't escape from the fate. No one can escape from death. In everyone's life, the place and time of the death, it already fixed. I hope all of you understood this very short, at the same time very powerful story, Appointment in Samara. Somerset Maugham added this short story, Appointment in Samara, in one of his famous plays, Sheppy, as a conversation between the protagonist Sheppy and Death. Here, Death is the narrator. Death says this story. Appointment in Samara, part of his last play, Sheppy, Maugham retells an ancient Arabic fable. William Somerset Maugham was one of the greatest storytellers of all time. In the simplest form, he ties together the basic elements of a story: setting, plot, characters, and theme with amazing perfection. The setting is Baghdad. The story is happening in Baghdad, an advanced city of the time. Maugham takes us through the transition of the servant in the marketplace to his master, and then leaves us with the assumption that the story closes in Samara, where the servant meets his fate. We can see that the story starts in Baghdad, but the story ends in Samara, because the servant already went to Samara to escape from death. At the same time, death already reveals that she had an appointment with the servant that night in Samara. So, the story ends in Samara. Why was death strolling the marketplace? Is it possible? We can see death. Did she have an earlier appointment? The marketplace is bustling with life. We know it. Marketplace is always very busy with the people. Maybe death was there to show us that where there is life, there is death. Samara has long been a city plagued with death. From the time of this ancient tale to Morgan's retelling and still today. A civilized city of the time, even Baghdad, cannot escape death. Is the plot woven around the theme of destiny as commonly interpreted? I think all of you understood the theme of this short story, A Point in Samara, well. What is the theme of the story? The theme of the story is anyone can't escape death. A servant is thought that he will escape from death, but he doesn't know death had an appointment with him in Samara. That's why he went to Samara. So, no one can escape from death. That is the theme of the story. What are the characters you already find in the story? Death. Because death speaks the story. Death comes here as a woman. The servant was jostled by a woman. So, woman is one character. Merchant, servant, they are the characters. Then I want to speak about the plot of the story. What is the plot of the story? The Appointment in Samara is a short story about a merchant servant who tries to avoid his appointment with death. In the story, the servant meets with death at Baghdad. Then he lends a horse from the merchant and flees to Samara. He is thought that he will escape from death, but he doesn't know death had an appointment with him in Samara. That is the plot of the story. It is very, very important you should have the clear idea about moral of the story. In this world, there is an appointed time and place for everyone to die. I already told you several times, in everyone's life, the place and time of death, it's already fixed. The plot of any story must have a beginning, middle and an end. A good suspense story contains a sense of foreshadowing, a crisis, a turning point, and finally a resolution. In the beginning of the tale, the reader can feel darkness. Who is it that speaks? Death. The very thought of death is dark. There is urgency in Morgan's prose. Sentences run into each other, filling up like blocks that are about to come tumbling down. He chooses urgent words. Did you notice that? Trembling, jostled, threatening, like that. The servant believes death made a threatening gesture to him, creating a crisis. Then I want to speak about the middle of the story. The exact middle of the story is the turning point. The merchant lent him his horse. The servant makes his fateful decision and the plot reaches a point of no return. So I think all of you understood the middle of the story. I told you middle of the story is the turning point because the servant took the decision he wants to escape from death. That's why he went to Samaria by lending a horse from his master. The end of the story. The tale closes with Death speaking. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad, for I had an appointment with him tonight in Samaria. As if tying the loose ends of a noose, Morgan ties the last word of the title, Samaria. With the closing word of the story, Samaria, we know now that the servant will meet his fate in Samaria. There is no doubt it. That's why he reached in Samaria. Although the story is short and the character descriptions absent, it is not difficult to imagine death, the servant or the merchant. Morgan having given the details of the characters, their physical appearance. But at the same time, we can imagine all the characters in our mind. Death, servant and also the merchant. This is a tale narrated by Death, depicted as a woman. In the beginning of the short story, we met Death as a woman because the servant was jostled by a woman. She was trying to frighten him by showing the gestures. But the end of the story we can see the death. So here death is depicted as a woman. Did the original teller of the tale intended to make death a female, or was it merely a disguise? We can also ask this question ourselves. Did he deliberately give the gender female for death? There are more women in the marketplace than men. Had the servant been having a morning nip with his friends, would death had been in the form of a man? Then again, maybe the mysterious nature of a woman covered in a black burqa, resembling the cloak of death, better personifies the supernatural appearance of death. Maybe that is the reason. Somerset Maugham depicted death as a woman. The servant arrives to the merchant, trembling with fear, and leaves for Samaria as fast as the horse could gallop. As the dust settles, the image left behind is that of cowardice and fright. However, the merchant does not hesitate to immediately confront death, suggesting power and boldness, traits inherent for such an occupation. So, we can see the servant became afraid by seeing the death in the market. That's why he tried to escape from death. He fled to Samaria. Though the idea of fate or destiny is very clear through this short story, the theme may not be as simple as it appears. Had the servant not met death in the morning, he likely would have ended up in Samara by evening for some other task and met death right on time for his appointment. Imagine why the servant went to Samara, because he was jostled by a woman. Because of the curiosity, he turned back. Then she tried to frighten him by showing the gesture. Then he decided to flee to Samara and he wanted to escape from feet. Imagine if he didn't jostle by a woman, if he didn't meet death in that market, definitely he will not go to Samara. He will buy the provisions and he will come back to his master's house. So definitely death will arrange a special task for him to bring him in Samara. Appointment in Samara is too often interpreted as simply a tale of fate or destiny. Is it possible to avoid death? No one wants to die. It is human nature to desire life for eternity. The appointment in Samara, retold by W. Somerset Maugham, is a brilliant example of flash fiction. During the story, Somerset Maugham creates the setting at market in Baghdad. There is servant encounters death herself. The servant, becoming terrified of death, decides to run, worried that death is chasing him. Ironically enough, the writer shows us that death is inevitable and you can't run from your own destiny. In the beginning, a merchant sends his servant to the market to get supplies or provisions. Walking through a crowd of people while scanning the market for goods, the servant bumps into a woman, jostles into a woman. Concerned for whom he had just jostled into, the servant gazed over to look. Disguised as a woman, death stood there in front of him. The servant became terrified by death's threatening gesture and he ran back to his master. At this point in the story, Maugham does an excellent job of creating the servant's first encounter with death, giving the servant reason to flee the city of Baghdad. Continuing on, the servant begs his master for his horse to escape death and to ride to Samara, where he believes not even death can find him there. The servant says, "She looked at me and made a threatening gesture. Now lend me your horse and I will ride away from this city and avoid my fate. I will go to Samara and there death will not find me." The merchant, surprised and in disbelief of what he had just heard, decided to lend the servant his horse. He walked down to the market and confronted death and asked, "Why did you make a threatening gesture at my servant when you saw this morning?" The narrator replied, the death replied, That was not a threatening gesture, it was only a start of surprise. I was astonished to see him in Baghdad, for I had an appointment with him tonight in Samara. This is a key moment in the story. Morgan shows the reader that you can't escape from your fate. Your life has a beginning and an end. This part of the passage also showed that death was the narrator the whole time, almost as if death was telling us a story. Because we don't know when we will meet our own death. We can't predict it. We don't know in which place it will be happened. That's why we are calling it as fate. I hope all of you understood William Somerset Maugham, a beautiful and very powerful short story, Appointment in Samara. So, all of you please read the story well. We will discuss the fatalism and question answers relating this short story in our next class. Thank you.